Seatbelts are dangerous. No, I mean it. I'm not being cute. Look at the evidence. A person gets into a car wreck, they're wearing their belt, and they come out with 3 cracked ribs, a bruised sternum, and a stripe of purple across their chest so ugly you'd think somebody took a baseball bat to them. That happens. That's real. Doctors see it every single day. There's even a name for it. They call it seatbelt syndrome. Syndrome! Like it's a disease! And in a way it is. You strap a band of nylon across your body, you get into a crash, and that band does damage. Real, measurable, sometimes serious damage. So you might think, well, that's a design flaw. Somebody should fix that. Make a seatbelt that doesn't crack your ribs. Make one that holds you gently, like a mother picking up a baby. And people have thought this, seriously. For decades, there were people who refused to wear seatbelts precisely because they'd heard the stories. Uncle Frank got into a wreck. The belt broke 2 of his ribs. Cousin Jenny had internal bruising from the shoulder strap. There were actual campaigns, actual arguments in state legislatures, people standing up and saying, "You want to force me to strap a device to my body that's going to injure me? What kind of safety is that?" And you know what? Their facts were right. The belt does those things. It does crack ribs. It does bruise your chest. Sometimes it damages organs underneath. Those are not myths. Those are medical realities documented in thousands of emergency room reports. So how can I stand here and tell you that this rib-cracking, bruise-making strip of fabric is one of the greatest safety inventions in human history? That's completely wrong. The idea that the seatbelt is flawed because it causes injury. And I can prove it, with nothing more than Newton's laws and a little arithmetic. But we need to start at the beginning. Not with seatbelts, with crashes. Because I think most people have a completely wrong picture of what a car crash actually is, and that wrong picture is what makes the seatbelt seem like a paradox. Here's what most people imagine when they think of a car crash. You're driving along at, say, 60 miles per hour. You hit something. You stop. Boom. One moment, one impact, one event. But that's not what happens at all. A car crash isn't one event. It's 3. 3 separate collisions happening one after another very fast, each one with its own physics, its own victims, its own timeline. And if you don't understand all 3, you can't understand anything about why people get hurt or how to prevent it. The first collision is the one you can see from the outside. The car hits the wall or the tree or the other car. The front end crumples. Metal bends. Glass shatters. The car, which was moving at 60 miles per hour, comes to a stop. And here's the thing that surprises people. It does this over a surprisingly short distance, maybe 2 or 3 feet, depending on the car and the speed. The whole front section of the vehicle accordion folds, and the passenger compartment, the box you're sitting in, goes from 60 to 0 in roughly 1/10 of a second, maybe a little less. That's the first collision. Car hits object. It's dramatic, it's loud, it's what the news cameras film. But it's not what kills people. The second collision is the one that kills people. And this is you hitting the car. Because when the car stops, you don't stop. You keep going. Newton's first law. A body in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. The car found its outside force. It hit a wall. But you? You're still moving at 60 miles per hour inside a car that just became furniture. You are now a projectile inside a metal box. A 170-pound projectile moving at 88 feet per second. And you will continue to move at 88 feet per second until something stops you. Without a seatbelt, what stops you? The steering wheel, the dashboard, the windshield. Your skeleton meets the interior of the car at the full speed the car was traveling, and the stopping distance for your body is not the 2 or 3 feet the car had. It's inches, maybe 1 inch, maybe 2. However far the steering column compresses before your sternum compresses first. And the time? 2 to 3 milliseconds. Not seconds, milliseconds, thousandths of a second. In that sliver of time, all of your momentum is transferred into the rigid structures of the dashboard, and the forces involved are staggering. And there's a third collision that most people never think about, but it's the one that causes the most mysterious injuries. The ones where a person looks fine on the outside but dies hours later. That third collision is your organs hitting the inside of your body, your brain slamming forward against the inside of your skull, your heart crashing against your rib cage, your liver tearing loose from the connective tissue that anchors it in place, your spleen rupturing from the sudden shear forces. Even after your body comes to rest, your soft organs are still moving inside you, and they collide with bone and tough connective tissue, and that internal collision can be lethal all by itself. 3 collisions. Car hits object. Body hits car. Organs hit body. They happen in sequence, each one governed by the same laws, each one subject to the same equation. And this equation, this one beautifully simple relationship, is the entire key to understanding everything about crash safety, seatbelts, and why a broken rib can be the best thing that ever happened to you. Here it is, and I'm going to say it in plain English, because that's all you need. The force on your body depends on 2 things: how much your momentum changes, and how long that change takes. That's it. That's the whole game. Let me unpack it, because each word matters. Momentum is your mass times your velocity. If you weigh 170 pounds and you're moving at 60 miles per hour, you have a certain amount of momentum. It's a definite number. You can calculate it. After the crash, you're not moving. 0 velocity, 0 momentum. So the change in momentum is fixed before anything happens. It's the same whether you're wearing a seatbelt, not wearing one, or wrapped in 20 layers of cotton. The physics of your speed and your mass determine exactly how much momentum must be absorbed. No technology changes this. No engineering changes this. No prayer changes this. The momentum change is what it is. So what can you change? Only one thing: time. How long the stopping takes. And here's where you need to stare at the equation for a moment and let it sink in. Force equals the change in momentum divided by time. If the time is very short, the force is enormous. If the time is longer, the force is smaller. Same momentum change either way. But the peak force, the thing that actually breaks bones and ruptures organs, depends entirely on how quickly you're brought to a halt. Let me give you a picture you can feel. I toss you an egg. A nice, gentle underhand throw, maybe 10 miles per hour. Now you put your hand out stiff, like a board. Rigid. No give at all. The egg hits your palm and stops in what? A fraction of an inch? A thousandth of a second? The egg explodes. Yolk everywhere. Bits of shell in your hair. All the momentum of that egg was absorbed in an instant, and the force was high enough to shatter the shell. Same egg. Same throw. Same speed. But this time, when the egg arrives, you let your hand give way with it. You cradle it. Your hand moves backward as the egg lands, slowing it down over maybe 6 inches instead of a fraction of an inch. The egg is fine. You're holding an intact egg. Nothing broke. What changed? Not the egg, not the throw, not the speed, not the momentum. The only thing that changed was the time over which the egg stopped. You stretched the stop, and by stretching it, you reduced the peak force to a level the eggshell could survive. That is the entire principle of the seatbelt. That is the entire principle of every safety device in every car ever made. You cannot change the momentum. You can only change the time. And before we even get to the specific numbers, I need to tell you something about speed that most people get dangerously wrong. Because the intuition people carry around about speed is linear. They think, well, 60 miles per hour is twice as fast as 30, so a crash at 60 is twice as bad as a crash at 30. That seems perfectly reasonable, and it's perfectly wrong. The kinetic energy of a moving object, the energy that has to go somewhere in a crash, doesn't go up proportionally with speed. It goes up with the square of speed, double the speed. and you get 4 times the energy. Triple the speed, and you get 9 times the energy. Going from 30 to 60 miles per hour doesn't double the violence of the crash. It quadruples it. Going from 30 to 90 doesn't triple it. It makes it 9 times worse. This is why highway crashes are so much more devastating than parking lot fender benders. It's not just that you're going faster. It's that the energy scales up so brutally with speed that every additional 10 miles per hour adds a disproportionate amount of destruction. At 20 miles per hour, you might walk away from a crash with no belt and just some bruises. At 40, you're in serious trouble. At 60, you're in a fight for your life. At 80, physics is not taking requests. The energy at 80 miles per hour is 16 times what it is at 20. 16 times. And all of that energy must be absorbed by the car, the belt, the airbag, and ultimately your body. This is why speed limits exist, by the way. They're not arbitrary numbers some bureaucrat picked to annoy you on your commute. They are engineering limits. They represent the maximum speed at which the safety systems of a modern vehicle can reliably protect you. Above those speeds, the crumple zones run out of metal to fold. The belt runs out of time to slow you down. The airbag runs out of distance to cushion your head. The physics becomes unmanageable. Not because the engineers failed, but because the square of velocity is a merciless function. All right, now let me put specific numbers on this, because the numbers are what make your stomach drop. You're in a car at 60 miles per hour. That's 88 feet per second. You weigh 170 pounds, which for physics purposes we'll call about 77 kilograms. Your momentum is your mass times velocity, which comes out to a definite number in Newton seconds. It doesn't matter what the exact figure is. What matters is this. After the crash, that momentum must reach zero. All of it. And the question is, how fast does it reach zero? Without a seatbelt, you fly forward freely until you meet the dashboard. The stopping distance for your chest against the steering column is about 1 to 2 inches. Let's say roughly 5 centimeters. At the speed you're going, that means the stop takes 2 to 3 milliseconds. That's all. The deceleration in that case works out to somewhere between 60 and 100 times the acceleration due to gravity. 60 to 100 Gs. Do you know what that number means for a human body? Let me put it in perspective. When you're sitting in a chair, gravity pulls on you at 1 G. That's the weight you feel every day. On a roller coaster, the most intense moment might hit 3 or 4 Gs, and people scream. Fighter pilots, in the most extreme combat maneuvers, experience 7 to 9 Gs, and they wear special suits that squeeze their legs to keep blood from pooling, and even then they sometimes black out. Astronauts during launch experience about 3 Gs. The human body starts to have serious problems somewhere around 15 to 20 Gs, sustained for more than a fraction of a second. And here you are, unbelted, hitting the dashboard at 60 to 100 Gs. Your rib cage doesn't crack, it shatters. Multiple fractures, flailed chest, fragments of bone driven into your lungs. Your aorta, the main artery from your heart, is attached at the top, and your heart and the blood in it have their own momentum. At 60 plus Gs of deceleration, the heart lurches forward and the aorta tears. That's called traumatic aortic rupture, and it's one of the leading causes of death in high-speed crashes. 80 to 90% of people who experience it die before they reach the hospital. Many die at the scene. Your brain, inside your skull, slams forward and hits the front of the skull, then rebounds and hits the back. That's called a coup contre coup injury, and it can cause massive bleeding inside your head. Your spleen, your liver, your kidneys, all unsecured inside your abdomen, pile up against your rib cage and tear loose from their attachments. All of this, every bit of it, happens in 3 milliseconds. Less time than the blink of an eye. Less time than a camera flash. You don't experience it as a sequence. You don't experience it at all. The damage is complete before any nerve signal could possibly travel from the point of impact to your brain. Now put the seatbelt on. And before I tell you what happens in the crash, let me tell you what the belt actually is, because it's more sophisticated than you think. Everybody sees a seatbelt as a strip of fabric. That's like saying a piano is a wooden box with wires in it. Technically true, but it misses everything that matters. The core of the system is the retractor, that little spool mechanism hidden in the pillar next to your shoulder. Inside is a reel wound with the webbing, and attached to that reel is an inertia-sensing locking mechanism. Under normal conditions, the spool turns freely. You can pull the belt out, lean forward, reach for your coffee, move around. The belt gives you slack because you're making smooth, gentle movements. But if the belt experiences a sudden jerk, a rapid acceleration, the inertia mechanism locks the spool. It freezes. No more webbing comes out. How does it know the difference between you reaching for your coffee and a crash? Inertia. There's a small weighted ball or pendulum inside the retractor. Under normal motion, it sits still. In a sudden deceleration, it rolls or swings, and it trips a locking pawl that grabs the spool. The sensing mechanism is mechanical, no electronics, no software, no batteries. Just Newton's first law applied to a tiny metal ball inside a plastic housing. The same physics that's about to slam you into the dashboard is the physics that triggers the lock. Elegant, when you think about it. The problem is its own solution. But modern seatbelts go further. Many cars now have pretensioners. These are small explosive charges like tiny airbag inflators built into the seatbelt mechanism. When crash sensors detect an impact, the pretensioner fires and yanks the belt tight, pulling any slack out of the system in a few milliseconds. Before you've even started to move forward, the belt has already snugged you firmly against the seat. This eliminates the few inches of play that would otherwise let you build up speed before the belt catches. It means the belt starts slowing you down even sooner, buying you even more time. And then there are load limiters. This is the really clever bit. A load limiter is a device, usually a torsion bar or a folding plate built into the spool, that allows the belt to give a little once the force exceeds a certain threshold. It sounds counterintuitive. You've just locked the belt tight, and now you're letting it slip? But the limit is calibrated. If the force on your chest exceeds, say, a certain number of pounds, the limiter yields slightly, letting your body move forward another inch or two. This does two things. It keeps the peak force below the threshold that would cause serious chest injury, and it adds a tiny bit more time to the deceleration. Think of it as a pressure relief valve. It's not letting you fly free. It's fine-tuning the force, keeping it in the zone where your body can take it without catastrophic failure. Pretensioner tightens you first. Webbing absorbs force through slight stretching. Load limiter caps the peak. The whole sequence plays out in less time than it takes to say the word crash. And every component is doing the same thing. Managing force across time, keeping the peak below what your body can tolerate. So what does all of that engineering actually buy you? Let me show you the difference. The belt grabs you across the chest and hips. Instead of flying free and hitting the dashboard at full speed, you start slowing down the moment the car does. Between the pretensioner snugging, the webbing stretching, and the load limiter yielding, your body moves forward about 4 to 6 inches against the restraint. Every one of those inches is purchased time. Instead of stopping in 2 inches over 3 milliseconds, you stop in maybe 8 to 10 inches over 40 to 60 milliseconds. Now 40 milliseconds still sounds like nothing. It's less than a 20th of a second. But compared to 3 milliseconds, it's an eternity. That's 13 to 20 times longer. And because force equals momentum change divided by time, if you multiply the time by 15 or 20, you divide the force by 15 or 20. Instead of 60 to 100 Gs, you experience something like 3 to 8 Gs. That is uncomfortable. 3 Gs presses you hard against the belt. 5 Gs can crack a rib if the force concentrates on a small area. 8 Gs might crack 2. And the belt leaves a bruise across your chest, a deep one, because the nylon webbing is pressing against your skin and muscle with real force. But 3 to 8 Gs does not rupture your aorta. It does not shatter your rib cage into fragments. It does not launch your brain against the inside of your skull hard enough to cause fatal hemorrhaging. It doesn't eject you from the car. It doesn't throw you into the windshield. It holds you in your seat, decelerating you at a rate your body can survive, routing the force through your skeletal structure in a way that bends and bruises but does not destroy. The cracked rib is not a failure of the seatbelt. The cracked rib is the seatbelt's signature. It's the proof that force was applied, managed, distributed, and survived. It's the receipt for a transaction between your momentum and your bones, brokered by a strip of nylon that bought you just enough time. I want to keep going with this, because once you understand the time principle, you start seeing it everywhere. I mean everywhere. A boxer rolls with a punch. He sees the fist coming, and instead of bracing rigid, he turns his head in the direction of the blow. His head moves with the punch for a few inches. Why? Because those few inches extend the time of impact, and the force on his brain goes down. Same punch, same fist, same speed, less damage. A boxer who stands rigid and takes a punch flush gets knocked out. A boxer who rolls with it stays on his feet. The physics is identical to the seatbelt. A parkour athlete jumps off a 15-foot wall. Does he land with stiff legs? Never. He bends his knees, tucks his body, and rolls. The roll converts a vertical stop into a forward tumble, extending the stopping distance from inches to feet. The stopping time stretches from 5 milliseconds to maybe 200 milliseconds. The force on his ankles and knees drops by a factor of 40. He walks away smiling. Do that same jump stiff-legged onto concrete, and you fracture your heel bones, your tibias, maybe your lower spine. Same height, same mass, same gravitational pull. The only variable is time. A parachute. You're falling at 120 miles per hour, terminal velocity. The chute opens, and it takes 4 to 5 seconds to slow you down to maybe 15 miles per hour. 4 seconds. That sounds luxurious compared to what we've been talking about. But if the chute somehow stopped you instantly, if by some magic you went from 120 to 0 in 1/10 of a second, the deceleration would be hundreds of Gs. The harness would cut through your body like a wire through cheese. The parachute works not because it's strong. It works because it is slow. The slowness is the safety. The billowing fabric catching air, dragging against the atmosphere, converting your downward momentum into turbulence and heat. All of that takes time, and that time is what keeps you alive. You catch a baseball with a soft glove rather than bare hands. The glove is padding, yes, but what the padding actually does is increase the distance over which the ball decelerates. More distance at the same approach speed equals more time. More time equals less force. That's why it doesn't sting. Every one of these examples is the impulse momentum theorem playing out in everyday life. The equation doesn't care if it's a car crash, a boxing match, or an egg toss. Force times time equals change in momentum. You cannot negotiate with the momentum. You can only negotiate with the time. And here's something elegant about modern car engineering. The seatbelt doesn't work alone. The entire car is designed around this one principle. Every component is a time-buying machine working in concert. The crumple zone at the front of the car. What is that? It's sheet metal, designed to fold in a controlled, specific sequence, like an accordion, absorbing kinetic energy and extending the time of the first collision. An old car from the 1950s, one of those gorgeous chrome-covered tanks you drive it into a wall and it barely dents. Solid, rigid, looks like the car won the fight, but the person inside is destroyed, because all that rigidity means the car stopped in a very short distance, which means a very short time, which means all the deceleration force was transmitted directly into the passenger compartment and directly into the human body. A modern car hits the same wall and the front end crumples dramatically. Looks terrible. Looks like the car was made of tinfoil. But the passenger compartment, the cage around the people, stays intact. The crumple zone sacrificed itself. It absorbed energy. It added distance. And more distance at the same speed means more time. And more time means less force on the human inside. People used to say they don't make cars like they used to. And they were right. Thank goodness they don't. The old cars were coffins with chrome bumpers. The new cars are engineered to crumple so you don't have to. Then there's the airbag. Same principle, applied to your head. The seatbelt catches your torso, but your head, which is connected to your torso by a relatively flexible neck, still whips forward. Without the airbag, your face meets the steering wheel. With the airbag, a cushion of gas inflates in about 30 to 40 milliseconds, and your head sinks into it. The bag then deflates through small vents, letting air escape slowly, controlled, so that your head decelerates over several inches instead of 0 inches. Those extra inches buy you the time your skull needs to survive the deceleration without transmitting a lethal force to your brain. And here's what's important. The airbag is designed for a belted passenger. It deploys at a specific time, aimed at where your head will be if the belt has done its job of holding your body in roughly the right position. If you're not wearing the belt, your body is in the wrong place when the airbag fires. The bag inflates at something close to 200 miles per hour. If you're already slumped forward, if your face is near the steering wheel because nothing was holding you back, the airbag doesn't cushion you. It punches you. People have been seriously injured by airbags that deployed while they were unbelted and out of position. The belt keeps you where you need to be so every other system can function correctly. The seatbelt, the crumple zone, and the airbag are all doing the same physics. They're all stretching time. But they operate in sequence, like stages. The crumple zone buys the first chunk of time during the first collision, slowing the car over a longer distance. The seatbelt buys the second chunk of time during the second collision, coupling your body to the car so you slow down with it. The airbag buys the third chunk for your head specifically. Each system takes a slice of that brutal compressed violence and spreads it out a little more. The cumulative effect is that a crash which would have killed you becomes a crash you survive with injuries that heal. And speaking of force, there's another dimension to this. We've been talking about force over time, but the seatbelt also manages force over area. And this matters enormously. When an unbelted person hits a steering wheel, where does the force concentrate? On the rim. A strip of hard plastic and metal, maybe an inch wide at the contact point. All of the deceleration force funnels into that tiny area. Pressure is force divided by area. Same force, smaller area, higher pressure. That's how steering columns puncture chests. That's how dashboards cave in rib cages. The force is already enormous, and then it's concentrated onto a point, and the result is penetrating trauma. The seatbelt spreads the force across a band of woven nylon about 2 inches wide that runs from your shoulder diagonally across your chest to your opposite hip. The lap portion spreads force across your pelvis, and your pelvis is one of the strongest structures in your entire body. It's a thick ring of bone designed by hundreds of millions of years of evolution to bear enormous compressive loads. It's where your spine sits. It's where your legs attach. The engineers didn't put the lap belt across your pelvis by accident. They chose the hardest, most resilient part of your skeleton to absorb the force. So the belt does two things simultaneously. It stretches force over time, reducing the peak force, and it distributes force over area, reducing the peak pressure. Less force per second and less force per square inch. Both reductions work together multiplicatively. The combination takes an impact that would be lethal and brings it down to an impact that is survivable, even if it's still painful. I want to shift gears here because there's something about how people think about this that I find deeply fascinating, and it goes beyond physics into the way human minds work. The problem with the seatbelt is that it's easy to see when it hurts you and impossible to see when it saves you. Think about that carefully. If you get into a crash wearing your belt and you come out with cracked ribs and a bruise shaped like a diagonal slash across your chest, you can see the injury. You can feel it every time you breathe for the next 6 weeks. You can point to it and say, the belt did that. And you'd be absolutely right. It did. But the thing the belt prevented? You can't see it. You can't feel the aortic rupture that didn't happen. You can't experience the skull fracture you didn't get. You can't know what it would have felt like to go through a windshield because you didn't go through the windshield. The catastrophe that was averted is completely invisible. It exists only in the physics, in the numbers, in the counterfactual. And human beings are terrible, truly terrible, at weighing a visible harm against an invisible benefit. We do this in every domain. We feel the side effect of the medication and forget about the disease it's treating. We grumble about the inconvenience of the safety procedure and never think about the disasters it has prevented. We resent the rule that stops us from doing something enjoyable without calculating how often that enjoyable thing leads to ruin. Our brains track what happened. They are nearly blind to what could have happened, but didn't. So when someone says, "My uncle got hurt by his seatbelt," they are stating a true fact. But the conclusion they draw, that seatbelts are dangerous, is catastrophically wrong. Because they're comparing the belt injury to a fantasy world where there's no belt and also no injury. That world doesn't exist. The real comparison is the belt injury versus the no belt injury in the same crash at the same speed. And in that comparison, the belt wins so overwhelmingly that calling it a debate is embarrassing. The data is brutal in its clarity. For front seat passengers, wearing a seatbelt reduces your risk of being killed in a crash by about 45 to 50%. Reduces the risk of serious injury by roughly the same margin. Think about what that means. Half the people who die in car crashes while unbelted would have lived if they'd been wearing the belt. That's not a marginal improvement. That's a revolution. And for certain types of crashes, the benefit is even more dramatic. Rollovers, for instance. In a rollover, the car tumbles, spins, rotates. An unbelted person inside becomes a loose projectile. You bounce off the ceiling, the door panels, the other passengers. Every interior surface is an impact point, and you strike them repeatedly as the car turns over and over. Worse than that, you can be ejected. Thrown through a window that shattered, through a door that popped open under the twisting forces. Ejection from a rolling vehicle is one of the deadliest things that can happen in any crash. Here's why. When you leave the car, you carry with you whatever rotational and translational velocity the car gave you. Then you hit the ground, or a guardrail, or the pavement, or the car itself as it rolls over you. Outside the car, there is no crumple zone. There is no airbag. There are no time-buying systems of any kind. You are a human body striking an unyielding surface. People ejected from vehicles are roughly 6 to 8 times more likely to die than people who stay inside. 6 to 8 times. The belt's most basic function in a rollover isn't even about managing deceleration force. It's about keeping you inside the protective cage that the engineers spent billions of dollars designing around you. There was a claim that persisted for decades, and you might have heard it. I'd rather be thrown clear. People genuinely believed it was safer to be flung from the car than strapped inside. The reasoning went, if the car catches fire or goes underwater, I want to be free to escape. And look, there is a grain of truth in that. In very specific, vanishingly rare circumstances, entrapment can be a problem. But the overwhelming majority of crashes involve neither fire nor water. They involve deceleration, impact, and sometimes rollover. For those crashes, being thrown clear means being thrown into the asphalt at 60 miles per hour with nothing between you and the pavement except your shirt. The thrown clear fantasy is a failure of probability estimation. People imagined the 1 in 1,000 scenario where freedom might help and ignored the 999 scenarios where the belt is the only thing keeping them alive. Let me give you the comparison directly. 2 pictures, same crash, same speed, 40 miles per hour, same car, same person. Picture 1, no seatbelt. The car hits a barrier, the front crumples. The person flies forward out of the seat. Their chest hits the steering column with a force equivalent to falling from a 3-story building and landing chest first on a steel pipe. Their head whips forward and hits the windshield with roughly the same energy. The windshield in older vehicles breaks into jagged sheets. In modern ones, it stays together, but the skull decelerates from 40 miles per hour to 0 in a fraction of an inch. The brain inside hits the skull, bounces, hits the other side. The aorta tears. Multiple ribs fracture, and the fragments puncture the lungs. The liver, the heaviest organ in the abdomen, tears loose and bleeds massively into the abdominal cavity. Total elapsed time from first contact to complete injury, about 15 to 20 milliseconds. Less time than it takes to blink. There is no possibility of bracing, reacting, or protecting yourself. By the time your nervous system could even begin to register pain, the damage is done. Picture 2. Seatbelt on. Same crash, same speed. The car hits the barrier. The crumple zone does its work, slowing the passenger compartment. The belt locks and grabs. The person's torso moves forward against the belt, maybe 6 inches. The belt digs into the chest. A rib cracks. The bruise will be vivid and ugly. The airbag deploys and catches the head. The deceleration across the whole body occurs over 40 to 60 milliseconds instead of 15. The peak force is 1/5 of what it would have been. The aorta stays intact. The brain bumps the skull, but gently enough that there is no significant bleeding. The lungs are fine. The liver stays put. The person walks into the emergency room. They're scared. They're sore. They've got a cracked rib and a belt-shaped bruise. They might be angry at the belt. And they should get on their knees and thank the laws of physics, because those laws just gave them decades more of life in exchange for 6 weeks of discomfort. You know, there's a man whose work made all of this possible, and he figured out the core principle not by studying cars, but by studying something much stranger. His name was Hugh de Haven, and in 1917 he survived a mid-air collision during flight training. His plane crashed. He was badly injured. And while he was recovering in the hospital, he kept asking himself a question that nobody else seemed interested in. Not, why did the planes collide, but why did I survive? He started collecting cases. People who fell from great heights and lived. People who were in terrible accidents and walked away. And he noticed a pattern. Survival depended less on the total violence of the event and more on how the impact was distributed. A person who fell from 6 stories onto soft earth might survive. A person who fell from 2 stories onto a steel railing would die. Same physics, different distribution of force, different time of deceleration, different area of contact. De Haven published a paper, I think it was in the early 1940s, analyzing falls from heights of 50 to 150 feet. People who survived those falls had one thing in common. Something had extended the deceleration. Soft ground, an awning, a snowbank, a hedge, anything that gave their body more time and more distance to stop. He called it crashworthiness, and he essentially invented the field of crash injury research. Every crumple zone, every airbag, every seatbelt in every car today traces back to the insight that one man had while lying in a hospital bed, wondering why he didn't die. And what De Haven understood, intuitively at first and then rigorously, is that the human body has a threshold. Below a certain level of force, tissue deforms and bounces back. Bones flex. Organs shift and resettle. Above that threshold, things break. And once you cross the threshold, the damage escalates rapidly. It's not linear. A force twice the threshold doesn't cause twice the damage. It causes catastrophic damage. Because once bone fractures, the fragments become weapons inside your body, and once organs rupture, you're bleeding internally, and the body's ability to compensate collapses like a house of cards. The entire goal of crash safety is to keep the forces on every part of your body below its failure threshold. Not to 0. That's impossible. Below the threshold. Below the level where bones break into fragments. Below the level where arteries tear. Below the level where brain tissue shears. The seatbelt can't eliminate force. It can hold the force below the line. And the cracked rib? That's the force kissing the edge of the line. Getting close. Touching it. but not crossing it in the way that matters. Now let me be completely honest, because I never want to oversimplify. Seatbelts are not perfect. There are real failure modes. If the lap belt rides up over the soft tissue of the abdomen instead of sitting properly on the pelvic bone, it can compress the intestines and cause what doctors call a seatbelt bowel injury. The fix is simple. Wear the belt low on your hips, across the bony pelvis, not across your stomach. But plenty of people wear it wrong. If the shoulder belt crosses the neck of a smaller person or a child, it can cause cervical spine injuries or airway compression. The belt was designed for an average-sized adult. If you're significantly smaller, the geometry doesn't fit. And for children, everything changes. A child's skeleton is softer, more cartilaginous. Their proportions are different. A child's head is proportionally much larger and heavier relative to their body. A standard adult seatbelt doesn't fit a child correctly. And if used directly, it can cause exactly the kind of concentrated force injuries we've been talking about, applied to the wrong parts of the anatomy. That's the whole reason car seats and booster seats exist. They're not just little chairs to lift a kid up so they can see out the window. They are physics devices. They reposition the child so the seatbelt geometry works correctly. They add their own padding and structure to further extend the stopping time. A rear-facing infant seat is especially clever. It spreads the deceleration force across the entire back surface of the baby, the largest possible area, and it supports the heavy head so the fragile neck doesn't bear the whiplash load. Every feature of a properly designed car seat is impulse momentum engineering scaled down for a small body with a different set of structural tolerances. Let me take this one step further, because I think there's a principle here that goes beyond cars. There is no such thing as zero force in a crash. I want to be absolutely clear about this because people carry around a fantasy, a beautiful, wishful fantasy, that the right technology will someday make crashes painless. That if engineers just get clever enough, you could hit a wall at 60 miles per hour and feel nothing. That is physically impossible. Not difficult. Not expensive. Impossible. Here's why. Your car has kinetic energy. That's 1/2 times your mass times the square of your velocity. At 60 miles per hour for a typical car with passengers, that's an enormous amount of energy. In a crash, every joule of that energy must go somewhere. It becomes heat in the crumpling metal. It becomes the sound of the impact. It becomes deformation of materials. And some of it inevitably becomes force applied to your body. The laws of thermodynamics and conservation of energy are not suggestions. They are absolute. The energy cannot vanish. It must be accounted for. What engineers can do, and what they have done brilliantly, is choose where that energy goes and how fast it gets there. They route it into crumple zones. They absorb it in the stretching of belt webbing. They dissipate it through airbag venting. They shape the time profile of the force, so that instead of a sharp spike that exceeds your body's tolerance, you get a broader, lower wave that stays within what bone and tissue can handle. They turn a spike into a wave, a stab into a push, and the push still hurts. It has to hurt, because the energy is real and your body must absorb some of it. The broken rib is not a sign that the system failed. It's a sign that the system did exactly what physics allows. It took an amount of force that would have been lethal and reshaped it into an amount of force that is merely painful. That's what safety means, by the way. I think people misunderstand this. Safety doesn't mean the absence of all harm. Safety means the reduction of harm to survivable levels. A safe system is not one where nothing bad happens. A safe system is one where the bad things that happen are things you can recover from. The seatbelt doesn't promise you a comfortable crash. It promises you a survivable one. And that promise, it keeps. Let me close with something that I think about sometimes, and it has stayed with me because it gets at something deep about how nature works. We live in a world governed by conservation laws. Energy is conserved. Momentum is conserved. You cannot make them go away. You cannot pass a law against them. You cannot pray them into non-existence. When your car is moving and it suddenly isn't, The energy and momentum don't vanish. They go somewhere. They become something, and some of that something is force on your body. This is true far beyond cars, by the way. It's true of every physical interaction you will ever have. When you jump and land, the earth pushes back on you. When a wave hits the shore absorbs the energy. When a star explodes, the blast wave carries momentum outward for light years. Nature keeps her books balanced. Every force has a source. Every impulse has a consequence. There is no cheating. And the seatbelt, at its core, is a device that understands this. It doesn't try to cheat physics. It doesn't pretend the force doesn't exist. What it does is reshape the force. It takes something that arrives as a spike, a brutal, instantaneous pulse of destruction, and it stretches it out, softens its edges, spreads it across your strongest bones, and across just enough extra time that your body can absorb it without coming apart. It's a time machine, a very limited one. It can't take you to the past. It can't show you the future. It can do exactly one thing. During the worst fraction of a second of your life, it can stretch that fraction of a second just a little. It takes 30 milliseconds and turns them into 50, takes 2 inches of stopping distance and turns them into 8. And in that tiny expansion of time, in those extra milliseconds that you would never notice in any other context, the force on your body drops from lethal to survivable. Your aorta stays intact. Your brain stays cushioned. Your ribs bend instead of shatter. You walk out instead of being carried out. 30 extra milliseconds. That's what stands between a cracked rib and a funeral. And the cracked rib, that painful, ugly, weeks to heal cracked rib, is the proof that you got the better end of the deal. It's the signature of physics kept within limits. The mark of a force that was tamed, not eliminated. The bruise that means the belt did its job. So don't be angry at the seatbelt for the bruise. Be angry at the crash. The belt didn't hurt you. The belt is what stood between you and the full, unmediated violence of Newton's laws applied to your fragile, breakable, irreplaceable body at 60 miles per hour. I want you to think about that. Not just the seatbelt. Think about other forces in your life, physical or otherwise, that seemed harmful when you first encountered them, but were actually shaping something violent into something you could survive. A coach who was hard on you. A rejection that redirected you. A boundary that felt like punishment, but turned out to be protection. What was the seatbelt in your life? The thing that left a bruise but kept you from going through the windshield? I'd genuinely like to know what comes to mind.